The moment the words left her lips, everything in the bright glass tower seemed to stop breathing, as if even the daylight pouring through the windows was holding its breath. A powerful CEO, known for ice-cold decisions and unshakable control, stood trembling in the middle of her own empire, while a single-dad janitor with tired eyes and quiet strength realized that his life was about to split into a before and an after. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected love that rises from the hardest places, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Ethan Hale had learned to live softly. Every morning before sunrise, he walked his 6-year-old son Noah to the bus stop, adjusting the straps of his too big backpack and reminding him to be brave at school. Then Ethan headed to the towering corporate building downtown, where he worked as a janitor during the day shift, polishing floors that reflected the sky and emptying trash from offices filled with power and privilege. He was 33, with a lean frame shaped by years of hard labor and responsibility, and eyes that always seemed a little older than the rest of him. His wife had passed away suddenly 3 years earlier, leaving behind silence, grief, and a small boy who needed him more than the world needed anything else. Since then, Ethan had learned to survive on routine, humility, and love that asked for nothing in return. The building itself was alive during the day. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, employees hurried between meetings, and the hum of ambition filled every hallway. At the very top floor sat the office of Aria, the CEO whose name was whispered with both admiration and fear. She was 38, impeccably dressed, sharp-minded, and known for turning failing companies into legends. To the world, she was untouchable. To herself, she was lonely. Her days were filled with contracts, strategies, and decisions that affected thousands of lives, yet her evenings ended in a silent penthouse where success echoed back at her without warmth. Aria noticed Ethan long before she ever knew his name. She saw him because he moved differently. He didn't rush, didn't cut corners, and didn't pretend to be invisible. He worked with quiet dignity, nodding politely to everyone, never asking for attention. One afternoon, as she stood by the glass wall of her office watching the city below, she noticed him kneeling to help an elderly employee who had dropped her papers. The way he smiled, the way he listened, the way he treated her like she mattered, pierced through Aria's carefully built armor. It unsettled her more than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Ethan, on the other hand, knew exactly who Aria Sterling was, but she existed in a different universe to him. To Ethan, she was just another reminder of how far apart worlds could be, even when they shared the same building. He kept his head down, focusing on doing his job well so he could keep food on the table and a sense of normalcy for Noah. Still, he couldn't ignore how often their paths crossed. The CEO's office was part of his daily cleaning route, and every time he entered that sunlit space, he felt a strange heaviness mixed with calm, as if the room carried both ambition and exhaustion. Over time, small moments stacked up like quiet promises. Aria began timing her schedule so she was still in her office when Ethan cleaned. She watched him from a distance, noticing the calluses on his hands, the gentleness in his movements, and the sadness he carried without complaint. One day she overheard him on the phone during his break, speaking softly to his son, reassuring him about a school presentation. The tenderness in Ethan's voice shook something loose inside her. She realized how starved she was for real human connection, for someone who wasn't impressed by her title or afraid of her authority. Life, however, rarely allows comfort without conflict. A sudden corporate scandal rocked the company, threatening Aria's position and reputation. The pressure was relentless, the scrutiny brutal. She worked longer hours, slept less, and slowly began to crack under the weight of expectations. One afternoon, in the middle of a sun-filled day, she locked herself in her office, overwhelmed by anxiety she had never allowed herself to feel before. Her hands shook, her breath came fast, and for the first time in her career, she felt small. That was the day Ethan walked in to clean and found her sitting on the floor near the window, heels kicked aside, tears streaking her carefully maintained composure. Panic flashed across his face, but instinct took over. He set his cart aside and knelt a respectful distance away, grounding himself in calm. He didn't ask questions or offer empty advice. He simply stayed present, reminding her through his steady presence that she wasn't alone in that moment. In a world that constantly demanded strength from her, Ethan offered quiet understanding without judgment. From that day on, something shifted. Aria began to open up, not with words at first, but with vulnerability. She stopped pretending everything was perfect. Ethan, in turn, found himself sharing small pieces of his life, the kind that came naturally when trust felt safe. He spoke about Noah, about learning to cook after his wife's passing, about the fear of not being enough and the hope of being better tomorrow. Their connection grew slowly, woven through daylight hours and unspoken emotions, fragile yet undeniable. The gap between their worlds loomed large. Aria struggled with the reality of her feelings. She was a CEO, admired and scrutinized, while Ethan was a janitor, overlooked by most. Society had rules, expectations, lines that weren't meant to be crossed. Yet the more she tried to push her feelings away, the stronger they became. She found herself craving Ethan's presence, his honesty, his grounding energy. He reminded her of everything money couldn't buy. Ethan wrestled with his own doubts. He knew how the world saw men like him, and he feared the damage such a connection could bring to his son's life. He had spent years rebuilding stability after loss, and the idea of risking it all terrified him. Still, his heart didn't listen to logic. It recognized something rare in Aria, something broken yet brave, something real beneath the polished surface. The emotional breaking point came on a bright afternoon when the scandal reached its peak. Aria stood in her office, sunlight framing her like a spotlight, knowing she might lose everything she had built. Ethan was there, quietly finishing his work, sensing the storm in her silence. She turned to him, her mask finally gone, and let her truth spill out in a whisper heavy with longing and fear. In that moment she wasn't a CEO, and he wasn't a janitor. They were two wounded souls standing at the edge of vulnerability. Ethan didn't hold back. Not because of passion alone, but because of years of restraint, pain, and hope finally colliding. He chose courage over fear, honesty over safety. What followed wasn't about status or power, but about connection that felt earned and deeply human. The daylight outside continued to shine, indifferent to their lives changing inside that office. The fallout was not gentle. Rumors spread, judgments followed, and lines were drawn. Aria faced criticism not just for the scandal, but for daring to love outside expectations. Ethan faced whispers and sideways glances, yet he stood firm, anchored by the knowledge that his son deserved to see a father who lived truthfully. Through it all, they supported each other, learning that love, when rooted in respect and kindness, could withstand storms. Aria eventually stepped down from her position, not in defeat, but in clarity. She realized that success meant little without connection. She invested her resources into community projects, education programs, and support for single parents, inspired by Ethan's life and quiet strength. Ethan continued working, not because he had to, but because he valued humility and purpose. Together, they built a life that felt balanced, grounded, and real. Noah became the light that sealed their bond. Aria didn't try to replace anyone. She showed up with patience and genuine care. Slowly, trust grew, laughter returned, and a family formed not out of perfection, but out of choice. Daytime became their favorite part of life, filled with school runs, shared lunches, and sunlight that felt warmer than before. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that love can rise from unexpected places and kindness can rewrite destinies, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your engagement helps these stories reach hearts that need them most.